Hello everyone, Jose of Your Fish Keeping. In this video, I hope to give you a simple introduction of CO2 in your aquarium. It is a source of fear for some fish keepers. I speak with some friends who are in the hobby. If you keep planted aquarium tanks, CO2 is a great tool to use for the health of your plants, growth and color. The very basic science of CO2. As animals, we breathe oxygen, we exhale CO2. Plants do the opposite. They use CO2 and release oxygen. Your aquatic plants with added CO2 can perform most of their vital functions, and growth, color, and everything else. It's really accelerated and much more healthier plants. Some plants they're said to be low requirements and do not require CO2, but I have seen that whether they require it or not, if you add it, do a lot better. How far you decide to go into the hobby certainly is entirely up to you. As we know, the hobby is expensive, and CO2 will be another added expense if you choose to go that route. Some people will use homemade CO2. That is not something that I can speak about because I have no experience. I have never tried it. I like the convenience of just having things ready, and I know that is something that I'm not going to have an issue with it. Once you make the initial cost or investment in CO2, beyond that point, it's just filling or replacing your gas tank periodic. In my case, 5 to 6 months. I run 3 tanks and it lasts me about 5 to 6 months replacing it. In my area, it costs between $25 and $30 for a 5-pound tanks that last me that long. If you have more tanks to run, then you may require a bigger tank, but I have found that the 5-gallon tank fit nicely under the cabinet and it suits well for my needs. I will show you the equipment that you require. This is pretty much exactly what I'm using at home. Costs about the same. You may use something slightly different that may be a little bit more or a little bit less, but this is the basic equipment. These are examples. They could be plus or minus on this variation. This is a 5-pound aluminum tank. It's $92. This is a basic gauge with 2 bubble counter and the solenoid which turns the unit on and off. CO2 tubing, it's about 16 feet for this one. Currently my setup is this, the 5-pound tank, the same exact stuff, and I have 3 bubble counters there. You can add as many as you want and extend it as much as you want to, but this one is running my 3 tanks of 65, the 120, and the 60-gallon tank. You will need a diffuser. This particular one is $10. There are some that cost a little bit more. This is one of the less expensive brand, is a glass one. This is your CO2 checker. Comes in liquid, which will last you forever. This basic setup is roughly, I calculated out with the numbers shown, to be at about $289. One thing, whenever you buy the tank, I believe the tank that I purchased was about $50 originally. Don't spend too much money on the tank because you are buying an empty tank, and the tank, when you go to have it, quote unquote filled, most places that deal with gases, they just give you another tank filled. They don't necessarily fill it for you. A few places may do it depending where you live, but the places near me, they just replace a tank for you. So the tank that you purchase, whether it's a cheap one, whether it's a great one, you'll never see it again. So don't worry too much about it. And most of the time they give you this nice pretty tank, which a lot of people who have home breweries, do their own beers and stuff, this is the same CO2 gas that they use, and the same any gas on soft beverages, like your carbonated drinks, is the same CO2 gas that is used. A lot of the concerns that a lot of people have is that they will overdo it and the water become too acid. Keep in mind, just so any science geeks out there, when you take CO2 plus water, it makes carbonic acid, which will certainly lower your pH on your tank. And that's one of the things that's probably one of the biggest things that people would have more fears about it. But once you fine tune your drop and you have a pH checker and you keep an eye on it, once it's set, pretty much it stays like that and you don't have to really make any changes. The drop counter is the heartbeat of your system. Don't be too concerned about trying to make adjustments and make changes and have your adequate levels of CO2 in your tank all in one shot. You can start very basic. Let's say you can start maybe at 10-20 drops per minute. Literally just sit there and count and just check your levels over a day or two. You don't have to make a drastic sudden change on the thing. This is going to be something that is long term for you, and you just take your time. Do it slowly, count your drops, check your levels, and just be careful just doing an adjustment. Any sudden changes can quickly alter your pH on your tank and have a problem. I had one little accident, nothing hard came of it. My 60-gallon tank is the furthest tank away from the thing. Now it just takes a little bit of time before the pressure builds up in the tubing, before you start seeing bubbles coming out on the diffuser. So I turned it on. I didn't see anything for a while. Then before I realized, my wife tells me, what's going on with the fish? Most of them were floating. They were not looking good. Quickest thing there, anytime you see anything wrong, you check your water parameters. I know that in this case, my CO2 checker was yellow, which is acid, it's too much. I did a pH check and it was in the low 6s. So we went from about 7.4, 7.2 for my basic pH in the water to about 6 in a relatively short amount of time. When I took a look at the bubbles first, the thing was just busting out in bubbles. So the problem was that too much CO2 went there. So you make gradual changes. Don't expect to make any changes. So what did I do was a very quick water change to adjust the pH. I had, I think, one loss of one rummy nose and one cardinal tetra. Considering that fish that I had in there, very strong big pleco risonals that I've had for a while, I thought he was going to die. So everybody did fine. So once I changed the water, everything went back to normal with no major loss. But again, a lot of the times you learn by mistake. So make slight adjustments. I had, my system was off for a while because I did some changes on the floor just between my time and having the new tubing. I went from the clear tubing. I like the black tubing better. So by the time I reset everything up again, and it has been months since I have not had my CO2 running. I have the 120 CO2 running for a little while now, but the other tanks I just recently set it up and have it kind of fine-tuned to a point where I'm comfortable with it. So yes, you will make an initial expense, but in my case, I did this expense about 4 years ago, and then it has been just changing the gas periodically. It's costly, especially if you're already stretched out a little bit. Notice the color on that particular Tiger Lotus that is there. I will go more into that in a little while. So once you have set your bubble counter to a point where your pH is appropriate, how do you check the pH? Well, you need a pH checker like one of these units here. Notice that the color here is a very pale light green. The solution is a deep blue initially, and as you see this range of colors, green is really where the CO2 is perfect. Yellow is too much CO2, which is very acid. As I have said before in previous videos, I do not make adjustments to my pH. My local water is 7.2 to 7.4. I did get a pH electronic checker other than the API or a strip test for pH. They can be a little bit hard to read sometimes. The color changes can be very subtle, and also looking at the drop checker, not the drop checker but the CO2 checker, the green could be sometimes it's hard to tell exactly. I mean, you can see green, you can see yellow, you can see blue. The pH on this 60-gallon tank was 7.4, and I did have kind of a greenish looking color that looked okay for it. So I have been fine-tuning it further, the drop count to be somewhere around neutral, where I do have the appropriate color. This is the 120 was 7.0. The other one was 7.4 and around 7-ish or so. So I have been adjusting the flow rate and the drop counter to be somewhere around 7-ish while maintaining the green color of the CO2 checker. Once you have fine-tuned your pH to the appropriate levels, basically you just let it go and keep an occasional watch on it. Ideally, you should turn on the CO2. I have them on the smart plugs timers, the CO2 to start between 1 or 2 hours before the lights go on, and also to turn off about an hour or so before the lights go off, so that a lot of CO2 is available for photosynthesis. Turn it off so whatever remains in the water column and the lights are still on, you'll continue using it so that you can get the max effect from it. So now that you have adjusted your drop counter to be at an appropriate pH level based on the CO2 checker, and or checking also the pH if you like to do that. I recently got the electronic pH checker more as a double check system to make a finer adjustment with the CO2 level and just checking appropriate levels for it. But now that you've had everything basically tuned to that, we go to maintaining the system. Algae will accumulate on the diffusers, and you may have to periodically clean them and get rid of the algae so that the pores remain open. What I generally would do is just to remove the diffusers, I'll just put straight bleach on them at the top and then let them sit there for a while, and they will clean up pretty nicely, as you can see these guys here, and then you can get a good bubble flow out of them. The chlorine does remove the algae right away, and because you have a healthy amount of CO2 coming there, it is an appropriate area for the algae to build up. After that, basically you just have to change your tank as needed depending on your usage, which, as I said before, in my area it's about every 5 months or so. $25 to $30 depending on which store I buy the gas at for the 5-pound tank, just to get it replaced. Disconnecting and reconnecting the tubing for maintenance. CO2 tubing is very stiff and it's hard to disconnect. I don't know how many diffusers I have broken over time. I found these quick connect. I figure with the quick connect for the water hoses that I use with all the attachment, also here on the drop counter, whenever I have to remove and refill them, it just makes it very simple to quick disconnect. There's about 10 of them for about $10, so it's about $1 a piece. Well worth the cost. It makes life a lot simpler when you have to do any maintenance or remove the diffusers for cleaning and refilling the drop counter. Depending on how far you want to take a hobby, CO2 is just another facet of keeping plants and so on. Notice this tiger lotus in the middle there. This 65-gallon tank with the tiger barb, I just started feeding CO2 very recently. Note the color on it. This one is the same one as I will show you, and I pointed out earlier in the 120 tank. Notice this tiger lotus in the center there. This is right now it's like a crimson red. I don't know if that's the right shade of the color, but it's like a deep burgundy color right now. This bulb has been kind of in and out. Some of the plants leaves have melted over time, has gone completely out, left the bulb there. It comes back again. Previously, when I first got the plant, this variety is a little different than another variety that I have in the same tank, the same 120, not this one that we're looking at. But anyway, the bulb itself, when I first got it, it was a very deep red, not as deep as it looks right there, but it was, they do CO2 where I got it from the plants. They were CO2 active on it, so I really like the red, and it maintains the red very nicely versus other varieties that I have had. But one of the things that I noticed that over time, without CO2, that red layer on the leaf almost literally was like peeling off, and you would see just green underneath. And I said, wow, and then I said, I like the plant. Let me just get get off my backside and reset and reorganize the CO2 level. And as you can see, that plant there, it is just an amazing red right now. The other ones in the other tanks, in the 65 and the 120, which I have shown you there before, they have more of a greenish hue to it, and very slight hint of red beginning to come on after a few days on CO2. I'm still making fine adjustment on it. I've checked the other day, 2 days back, I did with the electronic CO2 checker. The pH was about, one of them was like 6.5, one was 7.4. So I've been making adjustment up and down just to
stabilize the pH and keep it at a level that is close to neutral, but yet at the same time I'm getting a good color on the CO2 checker. So in summary, one of the things I want to say, most of you that are in the hobby that use or don't use CO2, you see the plant there, this is a 60-gallon. You see very different color from the other one, but I just looked at it this morning. I will do later a follow-up just on the color differences in those with and without CO2. So I will wait another couple of weeks until it has done its time. But it does make a big difference in the 60-gallon tank, if you notice on the previous images. Because I have a sanded bottom, I've been playing with different plants to see what I can grow there. So what I did was I used one of those Aquarium Co2 planters. I just kind of wedged it's a large bulb. I wedged the bulb in the planter and put a couple of root tabs under it, and that plant is growing like wildfire. It's really doing well, and now the color with the CO2 is beginning to change. So I'm really excited about restarting this again, and I will play with different plants. I will show you a picture at some point later. About 4 years ago, when the 120 was very heavily planted, I had small species in there. I did not have any discus at the time, or at least 2 small ones I had. Then I decided to just allow more space for fish, for swimming, and I redid the whole tank. So it's just very different looking. But again, that was then with CO2, as you could see the difference. And again, I just had a very active growth. I had to do, one of the disadvantages of having CO2 is that your plants will grow like hell, and you have to trim them frequently. But hey, you know, you want pretty hair, you have to comb it, right? But anyway, overall, I hope this was somewhat helpful. This is not to be a very in-depth detail on CO2 or too much of the science of photosynthesis and so on, but it's just to tell you the basic mechanics of it, and that it is not something not that simple. Yes, it is a little expensive to begin with, but then once it's there, it's there. You know, you set up. How much did it cost to get a large tank? Let's say your filters and everything else. It costs money to get it done initially. So you spend $250. That then you have it forever. You know, plus or minus something breaking on you, and you replace a diffuser, as has happened to me many times. You do things to improve it. I added those quick connectors, and those are little things that just makes the hobby easier. But if you want plants, if you want beautiful plants, if you want a variety of plants and get the most out of them, of their color, it's great. Check out 2 channels. Stefan, I'm always praising his tanks. He does really has amazing planted tanks. And also a friend in Spain, JR Fish Tanks. They do use CO2, and they keep amazing Dutch-style tanks and heavily planted tanks, so you will enjoy those. Thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of this video, and I will follow up later with the plant colors as they mature a little bit more with the CO2 actively running. Thank you so much for watching.
If you have not done so, please subscribe, share, like, and press the notification bell. Thank you for your support and visiting our channel.